Hello and welcome to week 18. This is a gameplay podcast and I'm delighted to be joined, as I so often am, by 𝗏𝗡𝗃. Hello, 𝗏𝗃𝗃.
Hello, Ben. Glad you're still delighted after so many moons or so many years, whatever it is, you know? Rocking a little early morning voice here, though, stateside. You know, we got the long weekend.
That doesn't normally happen for you.
It doesn't.
Is it a later start than normal?
I don't think it was so much the later start so much as the old fashions last night. I think that's really...
Oh, I see.
I think that's really what's done it to me
Under the influence,
morning.
yeah. I see. Next guest shouldn't have much of a morning voice, seeing as it is much later in the UK, and that is Josh. Welcome back. Good to have you on the Gameplay Pod.
Yes, thank you very much. Although, you know, another late night, same as last week, you know, super wildcard weekend. Not wildcard weekend anymore, super wildcard weekend was a good one last night. Another bit of American hand egg for me. Getting to the business end of the season. So this is when I pretend to be a, you know, clued up American football fan.
When you said wildcard, I thought you were like 2 weeks out. I was like, it's Centurions now, eh? We moved on. But we also have with us a top gameplay expert and tutorial maker, TaZz. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Ben, once again for the very kind introduction. Glad to be here.
Not at all. It's good to have you. So this is the man behind, well, amongst other people, the guide and very informative gameplay content. Good to have you back. We're going to start, as we often do on these gameplay podcasts, with some players we've enjoyed using recently. Any particular highlights? I know, 𝗏𝗡𝗃, you know, you often have a couple up your sleeve. It sounds like you might have had a busy weekend and maybe didn't get so much gameplay in, but any particular players that have kind of taken your fancy?
Yeah, I've kind of had the same squad for a little while now, and I'm just pretty happy with them, I guess, like as a whole.
Yeah.
Which is like great this time of year that I don't feel the need to make changes like heading into team of the year, but nobody, you know, really struck a chord enough for me to change up the squad. I'm also not opening packs, Ben. So like usually what happens is like I open the packs and I might get one player that I'm like, ooh, that's spicy. And I decide to incorporate him into the squad and it requires multiple changes. But since I haven't been opening packs, that hasn't been a problem. And the one thing that I did do was the, you know, 88 plus icon SBC. Maybe that was a little while back now, but I got the 88 𝘵𝘚𝘰. And so he just sort of slotted in to right back for me. And he's not like elite at right back, but he's not bad.
I feel like this is maybe a bad time to be asking about this, considering Team of the Year is around the corner and people tend to settle with their teams a little bit until then. Anyone for you, Josh, that you've used recently?
Apropos of absolutely nothing, World Cup star Marcus Rashford is an unbelievable attacker in the game, and he has the never offside trait, regardless of what he does in game, which I didn't realise was there. But really, actually, the dynamic duo Centurion Tavernier, Tav, because he is ridiculously like solid and his passing's very good. I used the Centurions Trent and really enjoyed him. I think Trent's probably a better player, but is also, I think, well, he was 200k. With this market, he might be about 15k right now. Oh no, he is still 200k. He was absolutely brilliant, but I wanted to give Kent and Tavernier a go. And whilst Kent was fun, he wasn't that Kent card, unfortunately. But I think we got as close as we have done in any like iteration of FIFA afterwards. But that Tavernier card was so solid. I think it's his physicals that does it. He's so strong. Like the 86 strength on a wing back is it's a stat I never really look for on a wing back. And you know, Jesus Navas seems to always be fairly decent despite having terrible physicals every year. And actually, he's kind of changed my opinion on it. He was just brilliant at everything. Like there was no real weak point in his game. Even his dribbling felt nice. Tight areas, he took good touches. He's got the 4-star skill moves as well, so you can kind of use him a little bit more attacking. I felt like I saw a lot more tactics this week of people kind of playing like a 4-3-2-1, but having one of their wingbacks get forward a little bit more for early crosses. And he's brilliant at that side of the game as well. Like, I really can't say enough about it. I've really enjoyed using him, and against the elite right backs in the game, he's really up there.
Yeah, he's one of those ones I haven't played against, but he looks very good. And what about you, TaZz? Anyone you've used recently you've been enjoying?
Yeah, it's the same probably like as for 𝗲𝗄𝑚𝑠. I also did the 88 plus mid icon in World Cup icon upgrade SPC, and I got the 89 Drogba. And I also tried to play a very cheap squad or untradeable squad in like 1 week before Team of the Year. So I decided to put him in and just try him out. And surprisingly, he did a very good job as a striker. I mean, like he's the typical number 9 inside the box. And even though stats wise, I didn't felt like he's really appealing to me with very low dribbling, very low passing, and like mediocre pace. But overall, I was quite surprised that I was able to score plenty of goals with him, and he did a decent job. Especially since like a few weeks now, it feels for me it's somewhat mandatory, at least for me, to have 5-star skills. Like in the last couple of months, I was really reliant on using 5-star skill moves to create some space inside the box, especially like after somewhat the lengthy meta. And thus, like the mid Drogba is not something special, which you feel like does fit the meta right now. But it worked out for me quite surprisingly.
What chemistry style did you end up using on him, actually?
Yeah, it's a good question. I used engine because like I feel like you have to boost the dribbling and also the passing and a little bit of pace. If I would use Hunter, for example, it would be feeling really weird for me to have him on like 80 dribbling and 75 passing. So I used engine, and my understanding is like if you have someone like a striker on lengthy, for example, the overall pace is not as important as soon as you have him just running.
Yeah, on the content pod, I'll have already spoken about how good 𝘬𝘰𝘬𝘦 the showdown is. And actually, 𝘬𝘰𝘬𝘬 is good, but the player that really got me to change up my system, get a FIFA 23 personal best equaling 16 wins in champs with, surprisingly, a 3 at the back, which I don't normally find that good, was Fred, the Centurions version.
Change your whole system for Fred?
Well, it was sort of. It sounds ridiculous, but I had a 3-5-2 that I was using as an aggressive option for chasing games and was working fairly well. I started in a 3-4-3 because I wanted to fit 𝘵𝘅𝑬𝘐 and 𝘵𝘂𝑚 in, and realized that a 3-5-2 would work quite well because I had 3 centre backs, one of which is 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦, 90, who's really, really fast, obviously, with a shadow. So I thought it might work, and I had 𝘭𝑪𝘬𝘬𝘦 on the other side. I think that was important in making a 3 at the back work defensively to some extent. But what really made it work defensively was actually bringing in Fred, who alongside Pedri, believe it or not, as the 2 DMs, completely changed the way that I played it. I guess I was always playing quite aggressively, but with those two, I could actually just charge around the midfield. They had the agility, mobility to cause problems going forward in the wide areas, but also defensively in the wide areas. And because of the instructions I had them on, being default, they were tending to appear there. And actually, with the 3 in the centre backs, it doesn't matter too much if one of them is going to shift out wide, put pressure on, or be an attacking threat in the wide positions. So Fred was perfect at stopping those counters, basically.
On that point, Fred has 92 interceptions and 98 aggression base on his card. So it would lend to that fairly nicely.
Yeah, exactly. And Pedri, not so good in that sense in terms of the aggression, but still has high, still very good interceptions, and decent enough defensive stats, better going forward, but the combination works really well.
Fredri.
Yeah, exactly, Fredri. And should give some credit to the wide players too. 𝘭𝑪𝘬𝘬𝘦, the Moments version, and the Centurions 𝘵𝑎𝑠𝑘𝑒𝑧, really solid. And 𝘭𝑪𝘬𝘬𝘦 has that ability to do the skill moves in the final third, which are nice. And I sometimes use the hug sidelines, generally didn't. I don't think it was that necessary. Seemed to be that players found the width, even though I was on 1 width, which, yeah, 𝗲𝗄𝑚𝑠, you know about.
Well, it's just stupid that it plays nothing like what you would expect 1 width to play like.
Yeah, it's just bad. I mean, I did have them on stay wide, which is going to help get them wide, and they had to come back on defense, getting behind. Really need to be players, again, that can go both ways. They need to have an attacking threat. It's kind of similar to the midfielders, I suppose, but even faster than those central midfield players. Actually, the only other instruction in the entire squad was stay forward on the cam. So it is really about allowing the players to use their own intelligence, I suppose, to take up positions in attack. And I think that benefited the team in terms of the press after possession loss tactic. That was a defensive tactic I used. Had 71 depth, which is something that I've often found pretty good and a sweet spot for me. You could maybe take it down a bit if you wanted to, but I think you really do need to be able to set the pressure high up the pitch, or start putting that pressure on high up the pitch. You have 1 width in attack, but 30 defensive width, and balanced for build-up, but chance creation on possession. 5 players in the box, but didn't find that super crucial. I feel like because it was unbalanced, players were kind of not doing their own thing, but using their own intelligence, as I said. And it seemed to work incredibly effectively. And I think 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 being such a fast outside centre-back made a huge difference, and an actual centre-back, so he doesn't get that penalty. 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 being in the centre could get away with his lower pace just about, but you probably want faster. And certainly 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 did get caught out a fair few times more than 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦, because although he's quick, he's not max pace, and he's controlled, so he's not compensating by having high sprint speed and 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦, something like that. So I think look out for that. You do really need the near max pace centre-backs, if not max pace centre-backs, in those wide positions. But yeah, I think I've gone through everything, so you can replicate it from that. But if you're a gold or above supporter, you can check it out in the supporter Discord in the Tactic Bank. I'll likely pop it on Twitter at some point too. I should actually quickly mention, if you fancy becoming a gold supporter, or just a supporter in general, you'll have access to something completely new to FUT Weekly in the last 2 months, the gameplay workshop, which has been going down very well. You can watch that over on Patreon if you'd like to join up. Just search Support FUT Weekly. 36,000 FIFA point giveaway going on at the moment, so no better time to join. That actually ends relatively soon, so if you are a supporter, do get entered. Anyway, we are going to move on to even more tactics, because TaZz, you've promised me some English language exclusive German tactics.
The German tactics. German glitch abuse tactics. No. I was just saying to you before the recording that I used the tactic of a German pro. It's 𝘬𝘍𝘀𝘁 from Focus Clan. I'm not quite sure if you know him. Yeah. He was the coach of 𝘬𝘃𝗏𝘀 when he won the World Cup. And he presented a very nice tactic on his YouTube channel, and just basically copied it 1-to-1. I wanted to try out something new, and it's a 4th variation of the 4-3-3. It's like very hard to pronounce for me as a German. It's the worst formation to say it for me, but the 4th variation of the 4-3-3. And it had some nice nuances which I was eager to try out. For example, it was a tactic with press after possession loss for the defensive style. And based on the latest patch, like I feel like he recorded it before the patch, just to let you know. But like the latest patch changed something about pressing, but it felt like quite powerful, to be honest, with the way how you can, like right after you lost the ball, dominate the opponent and put a lot of pressure on him. So I really liked that part. And so like it was a lot of fun to play. And as I said, I played the mid Drogba as a central striker, and had on the wings Di Maria and 𝘵𝘇. And you played in a way that you have the one striker who is going to move into the center in some way. You don't feel it as much, because you will be more reliant on counter-attacking, it feels like, the way how it is set up. But overall, it was a lot of fun, and I was able to dominate quite a lot of players. I'm not quite sure how much in depth I should go. I think I'm going to give you the details about the tactic, but all I have to say, like, I have to give credit to 𝘬𝘍𝘀𝘁 from Focus Clan for this tactic.
What are the instructions on the 2 CMs?
That's what I was going to ask, actually.
Like, if I'm not like, there's one CM which you was going to take over the more defensive part, so he's going to be on stay back, and the other one is on neutral. Like all the default instructions. And then you have the cam, which is on free roam.
Okay.
And then on the wingers, you have on both, like, come back on defense. And then on the one striker, for example, I had 𝘵𝘇 on the right side, you will then go stay central. And then you have the right back in that case, which you have on join the attack, if I'm not mistaken. Or either it's balanced.
Is the right wing on cut inside?
Yes, it's cut inside.
Are both of the CMs then on cover wing?
I have to look it up, to be honest. But I think it's cover center for both.
Okay. That's interesting. As I said, we'll get that in the tactic bank, and also can possibly share it another way, potentially on Twitter or something like that too, for people who aren't supporters in the Discord. Great. Well, good to get that covered. And you mentioned the patch, actually, which is what we're going to move on to, because it's actually probably one of the more significant patches we've had in terms of the number of things that have changed. And we'll just run through what they've called the changes, which is kind of, when they say made the following changes, it's what they see as more balancing stuff. And then they also address issues. So they said, when playing against a team using constant pressure, your AI teammates will attempt to more actively provide shorter passing options. Also, when a CPU-controlled defending player applies constant pressure to the ball carrier, but does not win the ball back, they can take longer to track back. And this has no impact on human-controlled players. Decreased stamina decay by 11.7% for constant pressure, press after possession loss, and press on heavy touch defensive custom tactics. And in some cases, ball carriers are now more likely to maintain possession of the ball when pressured from behind by a defender. So it's all changes that change the game in terms of pressure. But there is one that seemingly makes pressure stronger, I guess, because you have decreased stamina decay by 11.7% for those pressure tactics. And correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, that does mean that you can now basically press for longer. Your players are not going to get as tired. And that's kind of a counterbalance to what they've done elsewhere in a way.
Yeah, I can't remember how much it was in a previous patch. It might have been like patch 3 or 4, where they massively increased the stamina decay for all kind of pressure tactics. And I kind of feel like that was a short-term plaster over the wider issue. And this now feels like they've found what the problems have been, because like it's probably a lot of it is placebo, but the moment I notice my opponents on constant pressure, it definitely feels like my players in the past have started not offering for like passes as much, but played bad passes and taken bad touches. And that might be to do with composure and all of those kind of things come into it. But it was way too broken. So they massively increased stamina decay, so you couldn't just do it for 90 minutes. They increased stamina decay by a lot more than what they've now decreased it by. So it feels like they've kind of tried to now do a partial fix where they've kept the stamina decay at a time where you can't run it for 90 minutes, but that you're going to be like, I don't know how other people have felt, but I've felt the ability to play through a constant press far easier this weekend than I have done in the past. And again, that might be a placebo thing, because I'm like, well, no, because the CPU's got to position players in completely the wrong areas. And look, they can't chase back as quickly. But it felt a little bit easier this weekend than it has in the past. It's something that definitely needed to be addressed. I've seen people just go constant pressure from kickoff, don't care about having 0 stamina, and just like hope to get a big enough lead that it doesn't matter. And with 5 subs, especially if you can take it to extra time with 6 subs, it really doesn't matter in many ways, because you could just switch half the team out and, you know, whether you want to protect a lead or go for a win, you just decide which area of the team you want to have stamina. But yeah, it's one I think we'll have to see how it works, especially with players that are going to have very high stamina now coming out with Team of the Year. It'll be interesting to see how effective the increase in the lack of stamina decay now is. Can you now run constant pressure for 90 minutes with a 99 stamina player? Like, it's something I've not really seen anybody look at yet.
Yeah, it's actually worth just quickly jumping in to say, you mentioned a previous increase in stamina decay, and it was 41%. So the total reduction is still 30-something%. So over the course of the game, the stamina decay has been increased by about 30%. So it's good to say that. But in terms of those changes they've made, James, I think it's quite good to see proper gameplay changes rather than just like tweaking numbers, which is what they were doing before, I suppose, and have done again, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you want to see them at least try, right? Because I think well, I'll speak on like the community, I think as a whole is like EA doesn't care, right? They just care about like the new version that's going to get released. I think that's been like a pretty common talk track. And I think even now going back like the past couple, maybe few years, that hasn't been the case. And like putting a patch like this out pre-Team of the Year is like pretty meaty. I hope that they took the Team of the Year ratings into account when putting in these changes.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Like, my concern is like these changes were made based on historic data that they've received to make those changes, when what I would like to see is more forward-looking. These ultra-high rated players are going to come out. We should actually drop the effectiveness of like, I'm not going to say it. Well, like, yeah, everything across the board by like 5% or something like that to account for this, so the game still feels like good. I don't think that's how. I'm not suggesting that that's like the right move. I think people would be like, WTF, dude, why are all my players like bad now? But I hope that they, in testing this patch and doing QA, they took those new ratings into account.
Used extremely good players.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that makes sense. And actually, I was going to ask you, TaZz, I felt like, if you think about what Jape says in terms of, maybe future strong players being affected by this patch, actually none of this particularly says anything about the player's ability or stats. It's just kind of like, we're going to make AI players just overall worse at this, right? They're not sort of saying, okay, if you're this good at, I don't know, interceptions or defensive awareness, you're going to be able to, still put pressure in the same way, which is probably, good to see. It seems like it's going to have an impact on all qualities of player.
Like, I feel it quite remarkable the way how they addressed it. Like, during the cycle of one game, like something your AI teammates will attempt to more actively provide shorter passing options. Like, this is quoted from the patch notes. And I feel like this is a way of changing, which I admire that they do it. But for me, I would never have guessed that they are doing something like this, because I feel like there's so much that they can actually screw up. Because like it's a risk that they take, because as soon as the opponent uses constant pressure, your AI teammates, as the one who's like trying to build up your game or trying to run an attack, the positioning and the behavior, the whole behavior of your AI teammates is going to change. It's going to be different in the way how it was before. And there can be so many nuances where this is not tested and not, as Jape said, QA is done properly, and that you notice something which, like, you get behavior which is not intended. And I feel like it's somewhat of a risk to change it during the cycle, which, as I said, like, I really like that they're doing something like this. So they show that they care about the game. And for me, it was no question that there was something wrong, because before the change, before the patch, I had the impression as soon as the opponent turns on constant pressure, your own team goes in a mode at which they are very stupid. Like, they are just like standing there.
Thank God it's not just me.
Yeah, they would, like it was really stupid in the way that they was just standing there and waiting while the opponent's team was rushing at you, were covering all the passing options, and they were just standing there looking at you when you had the ball, and were like, yeah, go ahead, like, let's see what you're going to do without, like, in this situation, because you don't have any options to play on. Now they have implemented something at which they come closer to you and stuff like that. But how is this going to interact with all the different tactics that you have available for your attacking playstyle? For example, if you play a tactic like long ball, this is a tactic which should not allow you to, or like whether your teammate's going to come short to you, but instead go long, and you would go try to play long through balls and stuff like that. So, like, how does it interact? And obviously this change makes sense in a way that this can be a counter constant pressure, but maybe this is not what you want to, how you want to play and so on. But overall, I like it. But it was really interested to see that they're able to put something in during the season.
Yeah, and what was really interesting is I was playing press after possession loss. And I guess you were as well. I didn't really notice any difference, and that makes sense because this is just for constant pressure.
Exactly.
These changes, and that's really good because ultimately, people playing press after possession loss, press after heavy touch, it was effective, but it was certainly something you could beat. Right? It wasn't something that was extremely overpowered. I felt before the patch, and you could play.
There is one element to that I just want to like dive on before we move on, which I worry about, which was that constant pressure and overload ball side was a way to counteract somebody passing it around their defense. And now if you move to constant pressure, that now helps them to have easier passes whilst passing it around the defense, that could cause some really annoying games and like last 20 minutes of matches when somebody's playing like that. As TaZz says, I hope it's been properly tested so that that's still like, so that it's tough to do that still. But yeah, that's the one side of this where I was like, oh, actually, there's another side to constant pressure is annoying when it's used against you, but when you have to use it, it could be annoying if you can't win the ball back now when you should be able to put that pressure on.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I felt like it was always okay as long as you pass back to your keeper, to keep the ball under constant pressure. But it wasn't easy, and that felt strange, I think, for a lot of people. I know we talked about it on the podcast. A lot of listeners were saying, well, it is not as easy as you think passing back to the keeper, and I think that's kind of fair. It takes a lot of getting used to, but that was the way to kind of counter constant pressure, I think.
I just wish they made it so your attacking players would be, I don't know, like show or drop or open up for passes if their attacking positioning rating was like over 85. Make some change so it's like, okay, if you are the type of person that wants to play out of pressure, we've given you the tools to be able to do that, but you need to make sure that you select the right players for your squad to do that.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, it could be a factor. Player ability, attacking positioning, for example, does affect players' runs and where they stand in the attack position themselves. So it could be that has an impact on this, and better players will be better at doing it, I suppose, but we just don't know based on those notes, which often are quite vague for patches.
There's another side to that as well in terms of the extra information, which is when they make a change to gameplay, they'll give you information. Sometimes we'll get one of those infographics. When it's something that they consider to be a bug or like something that's actively wrong, they'll just go, we fixed this, or it's been addressed. And that doesn't give us enough information. Like the first one, when chasing lofted through passes, defenders could incorrectly slow down at times. So they've addressed it. Well, what did you do to address it? Like, what does address mean? Is it fixed, or did you just go, oh yeah, that's a thing? Or like, and show us the situations in which a defender would slow down. Show us the gameplay where it goes, okay, here they're incorrectly slowing down, and this is how we fixed it. Because that's a massive change to how the game is going to play. And it's like 12 words, and we're supposed to just go, okay, yeah, we'll find out how that works, I suppose.
The funniest one for me, and maybe this is just me, but it said in some cases, a quick free kick wouldn't be taken, and it transitioned to a regular free kick, where actually I don't think I've had a quick free kick this entire cycle, which is bizarre, right? I don't know if that's different for anyone else.
I don't think so.
No, it was always because when they didn't get the ball back where you could take the free kick.
It was pretty funny. It was like some kind of comedy sketch, but it's one of those things where that's been an issue since the start. You kind of think, could we have had these fixes earlier, please? It would have made the gameplay experience more enjoyable. There are still issues to fix, but it feels like those fixes will continue. We had a very late gameplay patch last cycle, so even balancing could happen late into the cycle. In terms of the other things we've seen here, fixes, you mentioned lofted through passes, which is a big one. Something that they seem to add a fix in for every cycle as well, that lofted through pass, defenders incorrectly slowing down at times. It always happens, always seems to get addressed at some point. Addressed further instances of the ball unintentionally falling back to the attacking player after a defender makes a tackle. Again, we don't know how much. That's always the case with these, but it is good to see that because that's something that's been a big frustration this cycle compared to last cycle. During kickoffs, teams with a high defensive line could push up too closely to the center of the pitch. I'd say I didn't really notice that one, but it's good to see that being corrected. Kickoff is quite weird at times. In some cases, using player lock when playing with customized controls could result in unwanted requests being performed. I guess that's not going to affect a lot of people, but again, good to see it being changed. When locking to a player without the ball, the CPU ball carrier could perform unwanted skill moves or passes. This is kind of funny. I don't think I've ever seen this.
I have seen this. I've got a clip I have to show you where I think it might have been the Panthers who was playing, and he player locks onto a different player, and 𝘬𝘠𝗲𝗏 genuinely does like a 25-yard bridge of the ball, and it was just the CPU that did it. And it was, I've never seen anybody do it whilst controlling a player.
I was just imagining like the AI doing like 𝘵𝗮𝗃 cancels around players. That makes more sense. You got some fixes to animations when physical contact was happening between players. Sometimes a semi-assisted through pass could incorrectly be hit out of play. I think we've probably all seen that. Removed head animations that could unnecessarily occur when a player was requested to perform a header, but was not in contention for the ball. And this is actually really good because it's something that Ivan was mentioning the other week that causes defenders to essentially stop or have to do an animation when they could be defending the situation in another way. So it's good to see. In some specific situations, the CPU AI could not win the ball back if the human controlled player was shielding the ball. I guess that's a fix for the old squad battles glitch, which seems to crop up quite often. Further addressed instances of the ball carriers running over the ball when making a dribble. In some cases, the CPU AI goalkeeper could perform an unintentionally poor pass from a goal kick. In rare situations, after receiving a pass, the ball carrier could become momentarily unresponsive. Improved referee logic when making foul decisions in situations where the offending player quickly moved away from the ball carrier. And improved referee logic when making foul decisions regarding slide tackles, which is pretty good because there are some suspect slide tackles that go on that don't get punished, and vice versa, actually, to be fair, as well. So that's the patch in a nutshell. It's a pretty big one, actually. I think it's one of the bigger ones we've had this cycle. I think most of it people seem to be quite happy with. I mean, I got my joint best ever result in champs, so I guess I'm happy with it so far. And yeah, I was pleased because I was playing press after possession loss and that was still viable, and that's great. If anything, obviously you're getting a bit more stamina, which is nice. And yeah, I think we can probably move ourselves on to more mechanical based gameplay questions. Not too much time to do it because we've done a lot of tactics and patch chat, but I did want to ask this one, and it actually relates to what I was talking about defensive midfielders. TaZz, who's on a bit of a streak of asking good gameplay questions, actually says, dual CDM/midfield defense question. Where do you sit on minimum defensive stats/rating for a suitable holding midfielder? In a 2 CDM setup, do you feel you need a minimum defensive rating to be effective, or can you get away with, say, 60 defense on one of your 2 midfielders? And also in the 4-3-2-1 setup, how many of your midfielders should have, say, over 80 defense? I guess just saying like 80 defense or 60 defense obviously isn't probably specific enough because it is about those in-game stats, not necessarily that. If a player has really high sliding tackle or high heading accuracy, that's not going to matter too much.
I actually am increasingly like it doesn't matter that much. There's some stats that I look at more. Like I like looking at interceptions and I look at aggression. I think aggression goes a long way in terms of how impactful a player feels for you, because hyper-aggressive players they seem to feel like they're everywhere. My midfield 3 right now, I use the World Cup 𝗪𝘀𝘀𝘀, who I think I use an engine on him, but he's got like base mid-80s aggression, I think. And his interceptions base is 90, and I use him as my sole holding midfielder. Yeah. That's where I'm like increasingly like, I don't know. And then I use 𝘬𝘯𝘰𝘠𝘬𝘠, who with a hawk, so his aggression is I think at 99. And I use 𝘚𝘃𝗲𝗏 as the World Cup one as my other midfielder in a 3-man midfield, which is like maybe an odd selection, maybe not so much. But if you put a hawk on him, he gets like 93 aggression as well. And
77 defensive awareness isn't bad as well for like a more attacking midfielder.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, 71 interceptions and 68 standing tackle isn't anything to write home about. But he's so aggressive, so he's willing to put a foot in, which makes it feel like he's, you know what I mean?
92 reactions as well. High defensive work rate. That'll do it. Yeah.
Like the defensive stats certainly matter, but when you're looking at players for your squad, reactions and aggression go such a long way.
Well, I think particularly if you have that midfield 3 going on as well.
Yeah, people forget that if you're manually controlling anyone in this game, they're like mental, like positioning stats don't matter. Like just baseline.
That being said, interceptions do make a bit of a difference still, right? Because they just won't pick up the ball if they have low interceptions.
I think when you have a high interceptions attribute, the players get new or different kind of animations which help with interceptions. Like if you have a player which has high interceptions, sometimes they will go for slide tackles to intercept the ball and stuff like that. And I think this is something which can really help sometimes.
Yeah, I think the thing for me is it's got to be a feel thing for you. If you're using a card, or if you're using a midfield and you go, I never seem to be able to pick up the ball, get an interception. They don't, like, the ball seems to keep going through them. If it's a player that's got low interceptions and low defensive stats, yeah, that's probably right, that's probably how the game is meant to work, because you're not going to pick the ball up as much. But if you've got a player that is doing well in that midfield, definitely look at what are the attributes that they have. And as 𝗲𝗍𝗻 says, I always find aggression and, for me, interceptions are the two biggest stats for midfielders defensively. Even I tend not to actually do many stand tackles in the midfield. So my midfielders tackling is less important than their interceptions for me, like being able to position themselves correctly. The other big factor in this for me is work rates. If you have higher attacking work rates than defensive work rates on your defensively minded midfielders, I always find I'm being torn open, because they just don't seem to be in the right position when you pick them up, even if you're moving them around. There are some players that are always, 2 steps away from being where they need to be, and they're great because you just pick them up and move them into the right spot. There are some players that are 5 yards further up the pitch, and it's you constantly feel like you're chasing back. So I definitely feel like it's quite a big feel thing, and face card stat is a lot less important than in-game stats. So delve a little bit deeper than just 80 defending, because it might be 99 heading accuracy.
Yeah. This is very important. And also something what I want to mention about the defensive awareness, and I was a little bit unsure about it, and I just looked it up. They changed it how it works in FIFA 23. So when the defensive awareness attribute is going to impact on how fast you are when you're jogging, and when you exit from jogging to sprinting and stuff like that. So this can help you quite a lot. If, for example, you have a central midfielder which is going to hover in front of the defensive line to intercept balls, and how much ground you basically can cover with your central midfielder, for example.
Yeah, actually, just to wrap up, we haven't heard from TaZz and Josh about this. Who do you actually play in your midfield? And I guess what chem style as well, because that'll change the defensive stats. Josh, who are you using?
It's a player I actually couldn't believe the price of when he first came out, because I didn't think he looked very good. And it's the team of the tournament, Casemiro. I am currently experimenting with a 4-1-4-1 formation where both wing backs are on overlap and join the attack, and I have the DM drop between defenders and kind of play a 3-4-3-ish in kind of going forward, and he drops into that middle centre back position and is unbelievable. His passing is brilliant and all of that, but I play him with a shadow because he does need a little bit of that pace. And with that, he gets 99 interceptions, 94 defensive awareness. He's already got 93 base aggression, and he's brilliant at mopping up in there. And then in my other 2 spots in the midfield, I've got the Winter Wildcards 𝘵𝘃𝗍𝘬, who is very much not tasked with defending in any way, shape or form. And kind of his role is to get forward. And then I've got the Zidane icon SBC, who I don't think is worth the coins.
Ooh.
Medium work rates.
Yeah.
That's it.
I can't get on with him. He doesn't feel elite like I would expect a 94 rated icon with 5-star to feel.
Yeah. A lot of people have said that to me. You're not the first to say that either, I think.
Oh, good. I did have Kroos in there, the Winter Wildcards Kroos, and he was really, really good. And I played him with an anchor because I didn't think he needed help anywhere else. And he was very good. But again, that's more of a midfield area rather than necessarily having to do much else. He is also medium, but I haven't felt a massive improvement going to a 1.3 million coin icon from him. So
get Winter Wildcards 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘃. Everything improves.
Yes.
If you haven't tried him yet, he is what a player.
Yeah, he does look so good.
Yeah, toss a hawk on him.
TaZz, we haven't heard from you. Who are you using in the midfield?
Yeah, I have a team which I have 2 central midfielders. One is World Cup icon 𝘵𝘂, and I use him on shadow. So for me, I really enjoyed to boost the defensive stats as best as possible, because the other player that I play right now, the last weekend league, was Road to World Cup Wijnaldum. And I feel like he's if you want to have if you don't want to spend as much, or if you don't have as much coins, he's an amazing player for the coins that you have to play. I picked him up when he was just released, and I right away played him. And then now I got back into my team, and he's doing a very good job. And I also play him on shadow.
So in fairness, you actually do have very high defensive stats.
I feel like the way how I play FIFA 23 the central midfielders don't, like at least the way how I play it, don't have as much impact for my attack. So I don't require them to be as proactive in the attack, and therefore I just put a shadow on most of my players to just get their defensive stats as high as possible, because I want to get those interceptions, like those marginal interceptions, or just the ability to move around, roam around before the defensive line, for example.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Especially, I think if your system involves your fullbacks coming forward or something like that, then you've got midfield too. I can see the attraction of having high defensive stats for sure. So yeah, it makes sense. I guess we've given a very mixed answer, but I think that's the truth of the matter, is that it's going to depend a lot on your system. And I personally, like, when I had a defensive midfielder, funnily enough, it was similar to what 𝗵𝗽𝗻 was talking about with 𝗪𝘰𝗍𝘍, with him having about 86 defensive awareness. I was always looking to get the defensive awareness above sort of 85-ish, just to make sure that the player was taking up positions that I wanted them to when I wasn't controlling them, which is often the case with a defensive midfielder, like a proper pivot player. So I do think it's important there. But in the other midfield positions, I think you can compensate with other things like 𝗵𝗻𝘻 was saying, aggression, etc. And in the midfield too, I think TaZz kind of made a good point in terms of wanting players to have very good defensive stats, or they're extremely quick and threatening, like Fred and Pedri.
I think you have to just be aware what you actually want to get out of those players. So if you're more reliant on the central midfielders to be a part of your attack, and they have to get inside the box and finish your attacks, for example, then you should apply more attacking chemistry style. But if I notice like the central midfielders don't contribute as much for my attack, then obviously I won't invest a chemistry style into the attacking part. But what I think is also quite noteworthy, what if you want to have a more attacking central midfielder, I think the most important attributes, for example, are positioning and also the attacking work rate, obviously. For example, Road to the World Cup, wijnaldum has 89 positioning by default, and also at attacking high attacking work rate. And this, for me, is enough that sometimes he's going to be a help in my attack, for example.
Yeah, makes sense. Nice. Well, I think actually on that, we are going to be wrapping up this podcast. We haven't got through too many of the gameplay questions, but of course, next week there'll be another gameplay podcast, and we'll talk about those questions. If you'd like to catch that one will be a supporter episode actually, so you can support just by searching Support FUT Weekly for an extra podcast every week. Always up for a cheeky plug. And talking of which, 𝗵𝗻𝘻, you got your newsletter coming out, and it's moved homes, hasn't it? So we should plug that.
That's right. We're on Substack now. Review is no more. So I pinned a tweet on my profile, which is Twitter @AirJapes. But you can also go to, I think it's p2psnacks.substack.com, and you can find all of my formations, all of the articles, all of that good stuff, and check it out. And actually, Substack's got some cool features. So I'll be able to add some like VOs to the newsletter, which will be fun, go a little more in depth in some areas. So please go ahead and subscribe.
Nice. And we've also had Josh, who is, I know, gearing up for Team of the Year. And by the time you're listening to this, it will be, well, pretty much underway. So where can people catch you, Josh?
Yeah, Twitter, SpreadsheetFIFA. I do also have YouTube and Twitch, but I haven't actually uploaded or gone live in a few months now. That will change, but yeah, Twitter's the main place to find me. On the Team of the Year front, because this is going to be the public episode that's not just for the supporters, you can pack Team of the Years in packs that you get before Team of the Year. All right, chill.
Yeah, help trying to tell people otherwise.
Like every year, the same debate. It's so come on.
Every promo, you can pack the promo cards with ones you get, but no, for Team of the Year, EA chat said. Honestly,
great. Well, good to say that. And we've also had TaZz on this podcast. Great to have you back on the pod. And where can people find you?
Yeah, especially if you want to improve your game and want to step up your game, then check out the guide on YouTube.
Nice. And that wraps us up then. Thank you very much, as always, to all you listeners out there for tuning in. If you'd like to subscribe, then you can do so via all the different podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and now also on YouTube. So you can head over to youtube.com/FUT Weekly and subscribe there. If you're listening on YouTube, then obviously leave a like, comment, all that good stuff that helps the algorithm. Greatly appreciated. And apart from that, thank you very much to all the supporters out there and those icon patrons: Dave B, 𝘬𝘰𝗬𝘀𝘁 𝗫, DJ FIFA Player, Alan G, Alistair, Anthony R, Dominic P, Rob P, Jeff B, Stephen F, Tom B, Damon H, David S, Nick Jack M, Eric T, Neil P, Adam G, Dan W, Waterman, Jake G, Roger D, Springford, Elec, Bracco, Nishant, Harry P, Alex M, Lee A, Brendan W, Andrew C, Joe W, Timothy J, Dylan, Adam R, Sam K, Graham W, Andy, Ads H2K, and Brian V. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, Hugh J, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add, though. FIFA's a bit like life, really. It has its many ups and its many downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you